Well, good afternoon. I'm Teresa Cavaney. I'm with the Nuam League of Women Voters, and I'm the Action Chair of the Nuam League. Today we have as our guest Jean Prochniak, the Brown County Auditor Treasurer. Jean is in her second year of her second term in that position. That job is a big, mighty job, and it includes the work of the county election administrator. So today we'll be talking about the upcoming primary election on August 11th and the general election on November 3rd. And exclusively we'll be talking about voting from home, otherwise referred to as absentee balloting or vote by mail. I believe that some of the listeners may be aware that there have been many pieces of legislation before the Minnesota legislature on elections and on voting from home. Today we'll talk a little bit about how what passed the legislature affects Brown County, and we'll talk about other aspects of voting and voting from home. So welcome, Jean.
Well, thank you for having me.
I am very glad to be here. Can you tell us what the legislature did decide here a couple of weeks ago and what that means for Brown County in the upcoming elections? And maybe just give us general background on the law affecting voting by mail and vote from home.
Sounds good. The bill that passed in the legislature this year was a bipartisan bill, which is always good to get something through. Needless to say, we as auditors and election administrators asked for a little bit more. We wanted exclusive vote by mail. We did not get that. So in so doing, we ended up with a bill that provides flexibility to our jurisdictions, which allows us, because of the increase expected in absentee and mail voting, that we would have 14 days to process ballots this year as opposed to the 7 we've had in the past. That's a real help to us. The bill will also give some needed HAVA funds to us in the counties. At this point, the Secretary of State's office is working on how that money will be divvied up to the counties. I'm sure it is to bring in some protective equipment for our election poll workers.
You mentioned HAVA. What does HAVA stand for?
Help America Vote Act.
Got it.
So we'll see how that ends up. They're discussing that yet in committee. We also knew that now we have to train our healthcare facility people to be election judges. We are not going to have, as a trained election judge that I do for a Brown County polling place would generally go to a healthcare facility. Oh. This year, we have to train an internal employee, 2 internal employees, and we're going to have a third just to have a backup. But they're going to be responsible for administering the election there for the people. We certainly aren't we want their votes, but we have to administer it for their safety as well. So that was a good thing. They also allowed us to make changes in polling places until like July 1st. So, and changes in election procedures. So my first outreach was to our townships, and because they were eligible to go to mail ballot without any problem, we went and approached each of them and spoke to them about the concern with the health issues we are dealing with here in the country, and all of our townships responded positively, and that was just a blessing to us. Yes, we were very, very happy. Not that they truly wanted to, some of them really like their local polling place, but they respected the fact that there are issues and people will maybe take too many chances to come to vote. So that was a positive. So we've got over 3,823 voters that will vote by mail. The only precinct that could have gone to mail was Comfrey. They opted not to. So there's just a couple hundred voters there, so it's not real big. And our big cities obviously can't. Legislation allowed for people to change their polling place. So City of Sleepy Eye, even though they had it was a very nice facility that they voted in, and it was very conducive to the way they ran an election, was very small. And so we asked them to consider looking for a place that might be bigger, allow for social distancing, that kind of thing. So City of Sleepy Eye has gone to have their election at the Sleepy Eye Event Center, which is their new facility up there, and that should work quite well for them. And that will help them keep the voters the 6 feet social distance that we're all required to do at this point. And so some of these things have allowed us to promote the vote at home concept. We're working hard with City of Sleepy Eye because we had to notify every resident of the change in polling place. We'll be getting an absentee ballot application to consider. It's not that they have to, it's to consider. So
And that would be what I received in the mail a couple of weeks ago. I want to tell you that you now have 3,824 absentee balloters because last night I went on the Secretary of State's website and in less than 5 minutes signed up to get an absentee ballot for both the primary and the general. And I appreciated that you could request both at once or you could request them singularly as well. So.
And we appreciate anybody who does go online. I have to say, it is the easiest way because we will have to manually enter what we have otherwise. But anything to assist the voters in preserving their health, that of our poll workers, is very important to us. So we're doing whatever we can.
Can you give us just a summary of how voting from home works? How long have we had this option? And why do you see it as safer than voting at the polls?
Well, Minnesota has had in the statutes the absentee process for many years. In 2018, 24% of the people in Minnesota voted absentee. That's a pretty significant number, and we see the increases every year in our office. It is last year, or 2018, last election, was extremely busy at our site at the courthouse. We had started direct balloting in its first year. We're not going to be doing direct balloting this year. People would come in and vote and drop it in the machine. We can't do that this year. We do not have the ability at the courthouse for social distancing. It is extremely difficult. So we are hoping that people that come in would accept our application, fill it out, and we will take it and give them a ballot and ask them to go to their home, fill out the ballot, use one of our drop boxes to return their ballot, or put it in the mail. Postage is provided on all absentee ballots. So mail balloting and absentee balloting, there's not a whole lot of difference with them, except that mail ballot, they automatically get one. They don't have to request, they don't have to do anything. Absentee, we need to have an application on file, and that's where we do our comparisons. So, and as you said, you can fill out a singular application, get ballots for both elections, so it's really quite simple.
Now, we understand that election judges and workers may be exposed to the coronavirus, and in Brown County and really around the United States, election workers tend to be an older group, some in the higher risk category for COVID-19. How will this mitigate, how will voting from home mitigate that exposure?
Well, as we're all aware, as we go out in the world, there are a lot of requirements that go with protecting ourselves and our neighbors and friends. So we too would have to implement those things. We will do our very best to provide some safeguards to the poll workers, but doing it at home, your ballot comes to you, you fill it out, you're not going anywhere, you're not setting yourself up for, we have to go out often enough just to go to the grocery store, and many of us cringe maybe at going there, so why do we want to ask people, we want them to participate in the election, very, very important. I am 100% let's go vote, let's promote the vote, let's get it to happen, but let's do it safely. And I think we can. We have an opportunity here, and we just need to take advantage of it and protect everybody involved.
Now, some rural precincts in Brown County, well, it sounds like all except the Comfrey area have switched to voting exclusively by mail, and some of those had been exclusively mailed voting in past elections. What feedback have you gotten, and how do they like it?
Well, you know, the ones that signed on very early on, I think this is, my first election was in 2016, and that election was the one where we were looking at voting equipment purchases.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And I started looking at the costs of voting equipment, and I'm going, gee, there's alternatives to this that we could save the county, our taxpayers, money. And it's my job to work for the taxpayers of this county. And so I met with the election officials at that point and shared with them my thought processes about how we could save money in sharing equipment and going to mail ballot and using some of the other opportunities within the law. I had some sign-ons early on and some resistance. So, you know, you had both sides. The ones that signed on now would never go back. I put money on it. You hear them talk enthusiastically about it. They're pleased with the process. They haven't had complaints from the people that they serve, and so they are happy. Some others that want to continue have their reasons for doing it as well. And I respect that. That's not the issue. But in this year, I was very, very pleased that they stepped up to the plate for everybody and said, let's just pull back. They signed the resolution for a 1-year time frame. Mm-hmm. They can go back, you know, but at this point in time, for this election year, ballots will be sent to all township residents.
Let's touch on polling places. I know that in 2018, polling places weren't necessarily large enough, or parking was not necessarily adequate. For example, Harmon Park, the polling place was small, the parking was limited. One voter was injured on her way to the polls because of poor parking. I know we in the Nuam League of Women Voters called on the City Council to find better, safer polling locations. What's been done to address this for 2020?
Well, you know, obviously that conversation was very much in the topics, yes. And we, the city of Nuam made some good moves. They chose to move that polling site from Harmon Park to St. John's Church on the south end of town, a nice facility. It worked out really well for the election. So there is adequate parking there now. That really made people happy from that perspective, and we were pleased with that. A lot of the polling places are going to have to look at some changes. I know that we've talked about the community centers, civic center, the one with the hockey.
Yes.
The room there is a tad bit small. And there's only, well, in a normal election year, it worked well, but we are putting in social distancing
6 feet.
and number of people in a room. And that room would be just with poll workers. We're kind of borderline on the numbers that we could have in there. So they're looking at making some changes with lining people up in the hallways out, you know, doing some things. I trust that the city will do a very good job in managing the crowd flow and how it works there. So I would say that there is a possibility in this election, if people do opt to go to the polls, wherever they are established, wherever they are, there could be excessive wait times because of
social distancing.
Social distancing, only so many allowed in the room at a time. The cleanliness that's going to have to take place, the sanitation of the polling booths between voters, that kind of thing. So needless to say, at home, you've taken care of yourself. You
It's
know what
another
you do.
reason to vote from home.
It sure is.
In 2016, the Nuam League of Women Voters conducted a study on voter integrity, voting integrity in was Senate District 16. So we visited the county election administrators in several counties, including you in Brown County. And one of the things that we wanted to know is what steps are taken to make elections secure and to ensure that there's a paper trail so that any goof-ups in a computer are offset by a paper election trail, if you will. We also asked everyone about voter fraud. None of the election administrators indicated voter fraud. And in fact, in Minnesota and nationwide, after elections are audited, repeatedly the security of elections is being upheld. I'm wondering if you can just give us a little bit of an idea of what you do to secure elections and whether there's a greater increase or likelihood of fraud with voting from home.
I really believe that voting from home and the processes and the requirements that we have established and the rules that we have to work under based on Secretary of State and our legislative guidelines, we have to verify signatures, we have to verify birth dates, Social Security numbers, the last four, and driver's license numbers. It's a lot of information to have on one person to be able to invalidate something, to be fraudulent in obtaining a ballot or getting one through. So we go through a lot of those processes. I've been attending a lot of webinars and discussions through the Humphrey Institute on election training, and topics are really big right now on mail voting. And many of our states are total mail. And yesterday in one of our conversations, it was talking to Washington State and the state of Oregon, and it was said that over 100 million votes have been cast in the last 20 years. And in that time frame, 12 cases of fraud were determined.
Amazing.
That's pretty, it's not going to determine the outcome, bless you.
Excuse me.
It's not going to determine the outcome of an election. Needless to say, we still would like it to be error-free.
Sure.
But this is the real world, and there's always somebody wanting to play with something. But, you know, Minnesota has, as you said, a secure trail with paper trails. And one of the other things that I should promote is the fact that you can track your ballot.
Yes.
So as you submit your absentee application and a ballot is sent to you, if you go to our website or link directly to the Secretary of State, it will tell you that your ballot was sent. Or if you mailed your ballot, when it's accepted, it will show up.
Indicate that.
If it was rejected, it will say that. If a ballot is rejected for lack of a signature or some piece of information that's required, we call the voter and we give them an opportunity to correct any changes on the outside envelope. Once that's the only part we know is what's on the outside.
Sure.
Eventually we will take the secrecy envelope out of there and remove it away from the name of the person, and we will never know how that person voted. So, but at that point, when there's an opportunity to fix something, we take care of that. I think we had in 2018, the last election, we had over 1,100 absentee voters, and there were only 9 rejected ballots. One of them was for a lack of a signature. A couple of them were for that we didn't have a voter registration on file, and we had to get that, and we couldn't get a hold of the person to get to it. And there were 5 other situations that I honestly can't identify right off the top of my head anymore. But
so that's less than. Yeah, it's
minuscule.
Very small.
Minuscule. We really try to make sure that your vote will count.
I'm sure those kinds of errors when you go to the polls occur as well. People might go to the wrong polling place or not have
They can get a wrong ballot if you go to a combined precinct where you've got wards 1 and 2 or precinct 1 and 2. You can get the ballot for the wrong one, and then you get a letter that you voted out of precinct and you didn't have really anything to do with it. It was a poll worker error. Those things do happen. Do we try to mitigate that? Of course we do.
Sure.
But it can happen. We are human, and that's where errors occur. And so, but our judges do a really good job, and the number of those errors is very minute as well. So no complaints.
So let's turn to election judges and election volunteers. How many do you have and how many do you need? Maybe you don't actually know that number, but I know you're seeking more election volunteers, and certainly we encourage people in the League of Women Voters to be election volunteers. A number of our members are.
I know that I train about 150 election judges a year. That'll take on a whole new role again this year,
Yes.
because now we're going to have to train via Zoom or some other format, so we're working on that. There's a lot of people. I know that there's probably 8 to 10 on staff at each polling place at a time, and I know that they work shifts. Depending on the number of volunteers that the cities may get, all the election judges will sign up with the city clerk to be an election judge. We always encourage people to do that, but they make the assignments and hire them. So we're not too involved other than until it comes to the training time, and then we get involved with the election judges and make sure they're certified and have certificates to show that.
I have never been an election judge because I'm always doing campaign work, so that disqualifies me, but it always looks fun.
I think our election judges truly enjoy what they've done, because many of them are repeats year after year, and they know their jobs and what they're doing. And so are they fun to visit with? Oh yeah, they're great people, and we really appreciate their efforts.
I think Brown County is lucky to have you, and I'm so appreciative that you are educating yourself on what's going on around the country and on techniques that seem to be working to help us here in Brown County do a good job, both in voting at home and voting in the polls. Are there any other comments on elections or voting from home that you want to make before we wrap up here?
Well, I guess I'd just say that, standing in line with our neighbors and friends on Election Day is kind of one of those patriotic things, just like we do go to the 4th of July fireworks. That's just one of the ways we do it. But this year we really need to think about voting alternatives, and we want people to be considerate of our poll workers, my staff, and everyone else, the voters themselves. Take care of ourselves first, and we want you to be involved in the election. We want your vote. We know we can get it. We have an alternative method for you. So try to take advantage of those things. Call our office. We're there to serve you.
Thank you, Jane. A few words about the Nuam League of Women Voters. We meet every second Saturday from 9 to 10 a.m. and the last couple of months we've been meeting using a virtual method, and we get a lot done, and it has been fun. If you are interested in joining us, you can sign up for our monthly gatherings online, and there will be an online link at the end of this little program. Additionally, you can learn more about the League of Women Voters and how to become a member by going to our state website, which is lwvmn.org. I would also encourage you to visit the Secretary of State's website or the Brown County election websites, and those links are also provided at the end of this show. I really thank you for being here. I look forward to talking to you again before the election, and really wish you luck in convening what I know we've come to know as fair and really inclusive elections. Thank you, Jean.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.